Hello, everybody. Uh, we're here today with Justin Westcott, who has graciously decided to come here to be able to answer your questions about the DataGr8 challenge as part of SANCS. The way we'll be taking questions is twofold. You can either raise your hand, and then I will give you permission to unmute your microphone, and you can ask your questions and follow-ups verbally. Or we have a Q&A section at the very top of the meeting. You can see there's a little Q&A tab. If you click on that, you can type out your questions and we can read them out via text in that way. And then we'll go until we're out of time. So thank you all for being here. We don't have a question immediately right off the bat. So if there's anything you want to say, Justin, to introduce yourself or yeah, some general things about the challenge that you think it's good for the participants to know, feel free to do so.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Hi, everybody. So I think it's clear for those of you who were in my presentation that there is a direct alignment between the controls that we discussed very high level and the specific challenge. So the scope of the challenge, instead of trying to create a very, massive kind of daunting type of effort, I decided to focus on third-party management and that specific domain. So you will notice that the scope of this challenge is based around third-party management, supplier management, and the controls that you can expect from a governance perspective, as I presented. So I just want to make it clear that that was the departure point. So if you attended my presentation, then hopefully you would have been able to join the dots immediately. Say, oh, okay, that's the domain we are talking about. So for clarity, it is the third-party management domain of the secure controls framework that I'm specifically wanting to engage. I want you to go and have a look at it, read up about it, and really apply your minds. I did have a couple of key questions to consider. Was the first one that I stated was, how can a company check if their vendors have strong cybersecurity? And you will notice, I don't know if you haven't noticed yet, but I played also into what is trending in industry within the South African and the African context for that matter, is we are finding a lot of regulatory bodies are focusing on third-party supplier management and the depth of those suppliers. It's now me and my supplier and their supplier, right? So that is a bit of a trend. So focus on that. Have a look at that. Elton, at any point, just stop me. Just kind of giving an overview here. What security rules should companies require their suppliers to follow? So again, talking about the controls and the frameworks available that we previously discussed in the presentation that I did, is what rules do you think companies need to enforce on their suppliers? Now, this is quite tricky if you're not in the industry. If you are in the industry, it's also tricky, but it's a bit more obvious. But where do you draw the line between a supplier being compliant just because they want to deliver a service to you, and when do you accept the risk because that which your supplier offers you is greater than their compliance towards your standard? How do you make that decision? So what rules are fundamental in your decision making to determine the risk of actually doing business with a third party? So that's the second question to consider. The third one that I'm really looking forward to get answered is, how can businesses monitor their vendors to make sure they stay secure? Now, I want us to remember, if you cannot measure it, you cannot monitor it. So what I'm trying to prompt you to think about is, how would you go and assess and get some sort of quantitative measure to be able to first measure and then monitor your vendors over time? What do you think they are? And again, I took the controls-based approach from the presentation. What would you use? Would you go out and use a NIST type approach? Would you use an ISO approach? Would you use a secure controls framework approach, right? Because again, presentation I laid out the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm really just trying to make this challenge take us back to what we learned and go and apply it, in a more practical measure. So those are the key questions for consideration. Before I jump into the challenge itself, any questions around those things I just mentioned? Okay, deathly silenced. I assume
Yeah,
that
no,
means
I
I
was
can
gonna say,
continue.
whoa.
I think everybody's running away.
Dustin, can I just come in on the back of that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just for the students, you know, to just understand exactly what we're talking about here as well. When we talk about third-party supply risk, let's boil that down to an example that we can really understand in the South African context. So we know, for example, how many credit bureaus have been hacked in South Africa, whether it's TransUnion, whether it's Experian, and between them collectively, they have been responsible for huge breaches that have put every single South African's ID number, phone number, address, etc., out onto the dark web. Now, what are these credit bureaus? These are the guys that if you go and you try to get a bond, a loan, buy a car using car finance, they check, or when you want to rent a place, they check your credit worthiness and they then tell the banks. But the banks also push info to them in terms of, have you ever been in overdraft or not met your bond repayment? So they're sharing information back and forth, right? They are suppliers, they are in the bank's information security or information technology chain, because a certain amount of info is pushed back and forth. Also to enable banks to do credit checks when they're going to offer you a bond, etc. So they're linked. Now, the banks spend a fortune on cybersecurity. Standard Bank alone spent over R1 billion last year. But the credit bureaus are weak, right? So how now do the banks start investigating the security level and maturity of each of the credit bureaus that is linked in their chain, and deciding who they need to push out and who they need to keep, right? That is fundamentally the type of thing that we're sort of looking at. So we're just giving you an example from the banks, because you can go read up about how lousy these credit bureaus' cybersecurity is, and understand the difficulty for, let's say, corporates, for example, big entities who've got all these smaller suppliers in their chain that feed in and out of their networks, and what a risk they then pose.
I
So
agree. I really like the example. One that another example that I do enjoy also is the automotive industry. If you think about automotive and manufacturing, whether you are Volkswagen or you Mercedes or you are Toyota, you know, let's say you've got 160 or 180 different suppliers, some of them being massive suppliers, even import suppliers of raw materials, down to, and I mean, let's use like the Eastern Cape as an example. Some guy over there is busy supplying, you know, just nuts and bolts or windscreen wipers, right? Now, do you think the guy or you know, that organization, that small little company who's just supplying those nuts and bolts is going to be at the level of security and have the controls in place that the likes of a VW have, you know, or a Toyota or whoever, but they are in need of that small shop that is providing that specific, you know, size 8 bolt. So yes, I think that's also another example that I quite enjoy. I see there's a hand up there from Nicolo.
I think I need to,
Yes.
enable
Hi, hi, Noel. Hi, hi, Justin.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
You
Yes.
can.
Okay. Thank you very much for the challenge. Me and my team are looking forward to actually jumping in and participating. Thank you for the examples. I think because I did do a bit of research, you know, like on, you know, like to fully understand what type of third-party vendors there are, and it's super extensive and categorized. Like there are about you know, like over 12 categories of types of third-party suppliers. So the way you put it into perspective helps a lot. And I've also had a look at the NIST, you know, framework that is, there's one specifically for the suppliers and the supply chain. And just a question is, when we actually start, you know, using different sources of information, and we start, compiling our plan, all of that, do we need to use that as reference? Do we need to make like a reference list? And the other part as well is the brief says, it's a large company in Africa, and the way that you explained it, there aren't any specifics, even though there's like a massive category and subcategories of third-party suppliers. So can we just, should it be sort of like a one-size-fits-all? I don't really want to phrase it like that, but it should be implementable. It should be like various companies should be able to implement it.
Okay, that's a good question. So thank you for the question. I do believe you were in my presentation. If you remember, I touched on NIST 2.0 and the ability to, with NIST 2.0 versus, or the CSF 2.0 versus 1.1, we spoke about the applicability and industry-specific application that it really facilitates, right, using NIST 2.0. So I'm glad you're on the NIST bandwagon for this. My intention behind how you go and apply it is quite honestly, I don't mind. What I'm looking for is you can use your own organization in principle, not its information, but in principle, and you are going to define, I'm in this industry, we have so many personnel, and with that as the consideration, this is where we go. So I purposefully didn't say, there's 10 or 11 people, or there's 50 or 100 or 200, because what I'm looking for is the application of the principles in an environment that you are comfortable with to go and apply it. So thank you. It's a very good question. But I hope, hopefully that gives you clarity. I want everybody to say, okay, this is our team. This is the size of the organization. This is how we're going to do it. Because we also have mom and pop shops. I mean, we are literally, our smallest customer at DataGr8 is like one person, one man band. And the biggest being multinationals. So it wouldn't be fair on me or of me on anybody who doesn't have the experience of the likes of an entire automotive or national or critical infrastructure provider or something like that to actually go and apply it. So please use your context and apply the learned principles in that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I've also sent the link to your lecture, Justin Westcott, in the chat. So, or sorry, in the Q&A section. So if anybody here in the meeting would like to revisit and re-listen to that one, it's the one that I've linked now in the chat room. So you can go and take a look there.
Okay,
my
perfect.
advice to Nicola regarding her question about the referencing of something that they may use is, as far as I know, it's you're going to do a video and a presentation, right? So you can always, in your PowerPoint presentation, just the last page, if you want to put down key references. And on that score of references, let me warn you about the pitfalls of ChatGPT. It's all too easy to think, look, we're going to use ChatGPT to get us going here and wireframe this whole thing, and then we'll just sort of build it out. If ChatGPT gets it wrong up front, which it frequently has deficiencies, you've got a problem. But what we do find is that at some point, ChatGPT stops being an assistant and actually starts becoming damaging. There's a point of inflection. So at some point, especially as your levels of expertise are supposed to grow throughout the presentation and in the video that you make, etc., you're going to fall off the bus with it. You need to get down and get your hands dirty here and do the work and do the research and be able to demonstrate that you understand what's going on. Okay, so do not assume if you use ChatGPT that it got it right. That's the first thing. The second thing is, at some point, if you're asked questions, for example, and you actually don't know what you've done, you're gonna have a huge problem. So just tackle this thing with vigor and actually do the work. When it comes to making of the video, last year a lot of students actually used AI for the voiceovers. And we actually found that the voiceovers that were more popular were with actual people speaking. Instead of, for example, an AI American voice or whatever. So just, consider the trade-offs, etc. Be happy to be yourself and yourself with your accent or whatever it is. Don't feel that you have to go for some slick production. Be authentic. It's great. So those are just a few tips from last year.
Thanks, Noel.
So, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask. So I think deliverables, if I can maybe touch on deliverables, what I would like, right, just to set expectations from my side. First of all, and I don't know if any of you had to do anything in terms of the FIC or the FICA RMCP, but if you did, good luck, because you had to go and create a risk framework, right, to assess your risk. Very similar to this, just in a financial context. So I'm not looking for that. That's what I wanted to mention. I'm not looking for this massive risk framework. I'm looking for you to see and do you understand what are the factors to consider? Number one, when you actually go and check your vendors, and how would you do it, right? What would you look for? Why would you prioritize it? And how would you do it, right? Point one. Point two, the rules. What are the basic security requirements for the vendor? Now, bearing in mind, we've got technical controls, we've got administrative, we've got physical controls. I'm not looking for a host of a list that you copy pasted out of NIST or out of ISO. What I'm looking there is, again, understanding which rules are applicable when you categorize those controls to specifically vendors. So the focus there is the vendor side of things, and that's what I'm looking for in point two. What are the rules that you will put down as part of the controls that make vendor management and vendor security unique? Point number three, monitoring. Remember, we can't monitor what we don't measure. So how would you measure it? Quantitatively or qualitatively, it's up to you. How would you measure it? And over time, how would you monitor it? That's point number three. And finally, the response plan. Remember, on a very high level, we are going to respond when a control fails, isn't it? Or if we accept the risk and it comes into fruition and a threat is manifested. When that risk manifests, we need to respond. So the fourth thing I'm looking for is not an incident response plan that you can copy from somebody who's doing a SOC or SIEM. Absolutely not. I'm looking contextually to the requirements that you put out in your security rules and what you are monitoring, which controls you're monitoring in the vendors. What would a high-level response plan be? So how I would look at this and listen to it. So if it's a presentation, that's the flow I'm looking for. And if it's a video, it's also the flow I'm looking for, because we're boiling down. What is our problem? Checking vendors. What is the solution? Apply security rules. How am I going to assess that quantitatively or qualitatively? And finally, how do I respond if it fails? That's the triangle I'm looking for.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think one of the, in anticipation or waiting for other questions from our participants here, one of the major things about this challenge and the video and everything that we had a bit in some of the other mentor sessions is that the video is a 3-minute video, right? Which is quite short. It's not a lot of time to be able to discuss this. So, and we're also quite sharp on the 3-minute deadline. So really make sure that you keep it to 3 minutes or below and don't go over time. But in light of this kind of constrained time limit that they have to make the video, do you have any specific points of advice or guidance in terms of prioritizing how much time you spend on all these things or going about that process?
Absolutely, yes. I would use the inverse of that triangle I just explained. And the reason I say that is because fundamentally, the first requirement of checking vendors was something I touched on in my presentation. So if you think about the triangle, I've given you the most information here, and the output I'm actually focused on is testing the response plan. So I would do the inverse. I would spend less time in terms of how do you assess the vendors. Give me an example, right? How would you assess the vendors? And I would spend more time on how you're going to monitor and respond in the event of control failure.
That's very important information. And you know, guys, I just want to advise you, you know, if you've got questions, there's no such thing as a stupid question. This is your time to get the answers that you need for success. So if you have any doubts at all, shoot, because this is that time. And you know, right now, as you're listening to this, I'm sure there must be, if anyone was to tell me, I know you 100% know exactly what's got to happen here, I'd say to you, oh, I don't know, hey? So please ask questions if you've got any questions, because, you know, this is a really important prep session. And like I say, it's actually, you know, cybersecurity is not easy. So jump in and ask the questions. Nicola. I don't know if Nicola's muted.
Yes.
No,
I've enabled the microphone now. Yeah.
Okay, so just for my own reference, to clarify, that is why it would be a good idea to like create your own hypothetical company, because that way, you know, all of the points in the challenge, checking vendor security rules, monitoring vendors, response plan, you can actually systematically then apply it to that, rather than just a very open-ended scenario. So me and my team, we can create our own hypothetical company.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, perfect example is if I were going to do this, I would personally take something fun. Well, I think it's fun. Some of our customers are like massive export citrus farmers, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, that's like so cool, because we work with
Yeah.
these guys and we assist them in process automation and stuff like that and securing the processes. But just imagine, I mean, there's something to say, okay, number one, checking vendors. They're going to have different types of vendors. What do you think the biggest citrus farmer in South Africa has? What do you think his pains are in vendor cybersecurity versus the pains of a normal, you know, a realty shop that does you know, rentals, property rentals, for example?
Yes.
So, you know, that's, I agree. Play into that. That's why I said choose industry. So if you want ideas, what about a citrus farmer? How would a citrus farmer be different? How would the assessing of the vendors be different? Would there be different rules? Because now you're playing with different types of technologies, IoT and OT. You can use the mines as an example. We can use lawyers as an example. Really, just take one of those and jump into it.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. It's been sector specific. In fact, last year during the Cyber Talent Accelerator, we actually also had an Agri 4.0 company. It was called Nuts for Africa. That a whole massive scenario was built around. It was obviously an export of nuts, in case you didn't guess. But point is, yeah, sort of drill down on a sector, and when you're sort of working with your company and you have your little scenario company, it's also nice because it's something you can shape and hold and feel and get kind of a bit of emotion involved with, and that helps you a bit in terms of wanting to protect that company and the right things. And then sort of, yeah, perhaps you know, identify that kind of 1 or 2 or 3. You can scenario it out for yourself in terms of the vendors and what kind of risks they would present to the company. And bearing in mind, you know, obviously what we'd love to do with vendors that are a bit of a risk is say to them, okay, you just get going. But those vendors might be the only vendors that are actually supplying the stuff you need, and therein lies the problem. So yeah, it's there you go.
Great, thank you.
100%. Think about a pecan farmer, right? You got a pecan farm and you only got one place to go and buy your seedlings, and they got like 0 on cybersecurity. You're going to stop doing business because there's, you know, what you going to do?
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Still, nothing in the chat, but there was another thing that I was thinking of that came up previously, which is that we have that the groups that are doing this challenge are between 6 and 10 people in terms of size, which is quite a significant like size in terms of being able to work on such a small project, right? Such as a 3-minute video. So do you have any advice for managing like such a large group in combination with the specifics of this challenge? Maybe recommendations for how to split up the workload or stuff like this?
Well, yes. I think for me, if everyone's on the same page in terms of what is the industry and what is the scope of applicability in that organization, then it becomes a lot easier. It really becomes a lot easier to say, okay, I'm sorry, do we all agree on this is how we're going to assess the vendor? We're going to do it quantitatively or we're going to do it qualitatively, blah, 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 blah. Define high level and then get some guys to actually tackle the framework, the assessment framework. Because whilst they doing the assessment framework and how do we assess it, you're going to have a second group determining what are the rules. Now, when those two groups or those two portions of the group come together, you've got the rules, plus you know how you're going to assess your organization. So now you can actually say, well, okay, put the two together. Let's see how we're going to monitor it. So that's how I would split it. I would split stream 1 and 2. First, get together, define the scope, the business, the industry, everything else. Split into two groups, 1 and 2, question 1 or 2, or rather deliverable 1 and 2. Split that up into two groups, maybe put 4 or 5 on each one of them. And then when you get to the monitoring side of things, again, monitoring is going to stem from group 1. So if we had two groups, group 1 and 2, group 1 tackles deliverable 1, group 2 tackles deliverable 2, I'd then switch and then say, okay, group 1, you're now going to do the response plan, and group 2, you tackle the monitoring vendors. And that way, everyone gets exposure to everything, and everyone quite literally has to be on the same page.
We have a question from Kutluana. I've unmuted you, by the way, Kutluana. So you can just unmute your mic and ask your question. Kutluana Lekoa, your mic is... No, you put your hand down now. Okay. Right.
Nicola is resigning.
Hi, just a quick question. 2 of our members didn't respond to email, or they are not on our WhatsApp group, even though we sent out a link. Do we proceed without them? How does that work?
You should proceed without them, but
Okay.
if you will, as a group, identified your group leaders, for example, at the end of the challenge, we would need to know the names of the people who actually participated or who didn't participate, because if they didn't participate, they're not going to be in line for a challenge certificate. So,
Okay,
you know, I mean, fair is fair here, huh? So,
yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a bit more information about this in the challenge process guidelines that is in the manual and may also been sent out to you in an email. Essentially, if you have a situation where you can't get into contact with somebody, or you can, but they're just maybe not really doing anything, in that case, you should send an email from the point of contact that you've decided within the group to the cyberschool@hcss.nl email, and just describing the situation a bit. Let us know like what's going on, who it is that's not being responsive. But yes, I agree 100% with Noel. If you know somebody's not being responsive, you should not, spend an excessive amount of time like waiting for them to eventually join, and you should get started with it because it's a limited amount of time. And yeah, you should really try to make the most of it. So just make sure we get that email at some point so we have an idea of what's going on and we can take that into consideration for the certificates.
Kutluana, you can
Kutluana.
unmute your microphone. So just unmute yourself and then ask your question, please. Just unmute your mic, please.
The hands disappeared again.
Kutwano, could you just let us know what's happening? Are you trying to talk to us? Are you having issues? Or
if you're having issues as well with the verbal thing, you can type out your question in the Q&A channel.
Oh.
And then we can read it out from you there.
Okay. Well, I don't know if there's no further questions. You guys absolutely sure? Then we can let everyone go, I suppose. So this is becoming one of those going, gone opportunities.
Yeah, I'm out. Bye. Pew.
Thank you very much.
Knop, Rochelle from Woodmead. Right, let me enable your mic, allow mic. Right, you can unmute now, Rochelle.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I have a question. So you're a company that is hiring a third party, which is for instance, and we have to make sure that we create a plan for their suppliers, not their customers. So I'm just trying to understand.
100%, 100%.
Okay, so it's
correct,
not the
yes.
customers, it's not an onboarding of a customer.
No, it's not the
Okay.
onboarding, correct. So the focus here is we are the local grocer, right?
Okay.
And as the local grocer, I need to determine what is my risk tolerance. So what am I going to accept and not accept on a cybersecurity level. But I have different suppliers. I have got a card machine supplier that is PCI DSS compliant, and it is Bank X. So they would fall into a certain category, and I would accept a certain risk. On the other hand, I have a point of sales system. And for that point of sale system, depending on how critical that is to my business and the impact if something goes wrong, I want to be able to assess that vendor, sorry, of the point of sale system, the hardware and the software. Then I have the local individual who we WhatsApp when I order the oranges and the fruit and vegetables, right? So we look at that and say, from the view of the grocer, how do I, as the grocer, check my vendors? How do I assess that vendor according to their cybersecurity standard or maturity, or however you're going to approach that? And then you're going to say there are business critical people and there's non-critical, right? So a vendor of, tissue paper, for example, in the office, not on the same standard as somebody who's providing me with the internet. So that's the process we're trying to stimulate your to get you thinking about, is what is my third party risk of people who form part of my supply chain?
Yeah, and I think Justin's given you such a great example, because he as he said there, who's supplying your internet, who's doing your Wi-Fi, who's the security company that's got cameras all over your shop and the back of your warehouse, and all that can, everyone can watch your employees' movements, etc. How secure are they? So you can really start sort of looking and saying, well, you can see that the guy who drops off pouches of oranges every day isn't nearly as big a security risk to your company as from a cybersecurity point of view, as your interconnected internet provider or fiber provider, your security company that's connected to all your IoT devices, etc. And so you start going from there.
Okay, so you would then, for example, have to check the person who has your data of your footage of your store. Are they storing that footage in a cloud? Is that cloud secure? Is that what you're trying to make sure?
Exactly, 100%.
Okay.
Yes. So how would you? Perfect. So you've just given an example of a simple way to assess, for example, your cloud provider. I'm going to ask them the following questions. These are the 10 questions I'm going to ask them. And that's why we kept it kind of industry specific, because I'm going to ask these 5 questions to the guys who drop the oranges off, but I'm going to ask these 10 questions to the guy who's providing my point of sale system. And you motivate why you ask those questions, and are you going to quantitatively or qualitatively use metrics to have a risk calculation to say, this is why this is a 10 out of 10, which is the worst, and this is a 2 out of 10. It's just the guy who drops off the oranges, as an example.
Justin,
Okay,
can I ask you to
okay.
just clarify for the students on that quantitative versus qualitative approach?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe, am I allowed sharing my screen? Because I think I can.
Yeah.
Maybe I see in pictures. I see in pictures. It helps me a lot more. So I just want to see. I had an example over here. Okay, here we go. So, and so don't run away when I share my screen. Okay, not yet. Let me just explain.
No, you've had it now.
So please, I'm not expecting you to create this. This is not what I'm expecting, but I want to use this that you can understand what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to get you to think about. When we look at, we say, this is our industry is X, okay? Over here, I have either quantitative or qualitative means to determine if I'm assessing certain categories of risk. We know we're talking about, let's say it's a security for now, and this is technology security. I can go and assess that to say, okay, I want to say the levels of in terms of this, you'll see there's impact on the one side and there's likelihood on the other side, because that's risk. That's all risk is, impact and likelihood. And we were saying that we want to go and have a look and say, you know, if the WhatsApp, if we use these scales on impact, right? What is the impact to my business if the WhatsApp of the guy who I WhatsApp to deliver oranges once a week? What happens if that communication gets intercepted and somebody hacks his phone? Well, that means I don't have oranges to sell next week, but I'm an entire grocer. I've got fruit and veg. So you know what? I'm going to lose out on the one guy who wanted oranges that day. So if you take a qualitative approach, we're going to define it as insignificant, minor, moderate, major, or extreme. So I'm not putting a quantification, I'm not putting a number to it. I'm saying, you know what, let me go and define the definition. And if we have a look at it and we say, okay, how do we define insignificant if assessing the impact of that specific control failing? So now we're saying encrypted communication fails in the orders between me and the guy who delivers the oranges for me. So what are we doing? We're saying it's insignificant. How do you define it? The threat event could be expected to have a negligible adverse effect on operations, assets, individuals, and or systems. So it's negligible. It means I'm barely going to feel it. So that is a qualitative approach in which we go and define our impact metrics and our likelihood metrics, and then we go and say, this is how it looks. But again, and this is for example, I do not expect you to do this. It's a way of thinking that I'm trying to get you guys to. It's a principle. If we were going to take a quantifiable way, sorry, I'm running out of words today. It's been a long day. In the battle between risk quantification, right? Or us just going and saying, look, it's insignificant or minor. What we actually go and do is we say, if my impact is moderate and my likelihood is possible, right? Then I am essentially sitting in this range over here where qualitatively it's a moderate risk. But quantitatively, it could be a 30 or a 36. So if I had a 6 for impact and I had a 6 for likelihood, multiply the two, it's 36. Quantitatively, it's 36. But qualitatively, it is just a moderate impact and a moderate risk. So you are going to go and decide when you go about and you go through this process, which we said there's only 4 things. The first one is checking vendors. If I were to check the vendor, I'm going to say, okay, what am I doing selling oranges? If I'm only selling oranges, the impact is going to be high. How am I going to check that? I'm going to check communications then. I'm going to check a couple of things. Is the GPS in the vehicle, blah, 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 because I want to know my risk at the end of the day. So that's the difference between risk quantification, right? Or yes, there's a hand. Sorry, Nicola.
Sorry, you can finish your sentence first.
Okay, so I just wanted to put it out there. So when you go and say, how am I going to check my vendors? A simple way to assess them can just be questions, yes and no. And if you say yes for question 1, 3, and 5, then you moderate risk. If you say no for all 5, you high risk, as an example, because those are the questions. That's a simple way of checking. But you might actually go and put a number to it. But then you're going to motivate. And this is where I like the fact that, Nicola, you mentioned earlier, there's supply chain and vendor management in NIST, but also in NIST is what? Risk management. And those two tie together.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, please.
So in the case of our presentation, I do understand, what you said, don't go and copy some framework and just do it accordingly. But for presentation purposes, can we, because the graph you had was really structured, can we do a sort of presentation like that for each of, like the 4 points when it comes to putting our presentation together? Can we assess our, the company we took and applying the challenge to it? Can we present it in like a structured format like that?
Of course, absolutely. So 100%. So it won't be for all 4 the questions. Let's just get that clear. The applicability of you possibly doing that is going to be question 1, checking vendors. Justin, Here are my 10 questions. Security rules. Justin, from these questions, I am testing to see the following security requirements are in place. Now you see, we can actually that's step 2. Step 3, Justin, we're going to use a risk-based approach to monitor our vendors' risk over time. How are we going to do this? We've created a risk matrix in which our security rules test and assess in a simple way, allow us to check our vendors. And this is how we're going to assess our impact. This is how we assess our probability. And this risk matrix represents how we're going to take a risk-based approach to monitoring our vendors. So it would be point 3 that you would use something like that. Point 4 would then say, if I need to respond when a control fails, then if it was a high risk, right? Because again, remember, high impact, high probability, high risk, I'm monitoring it. And then you say to me, Justin, we've identified 10 controls for the purpose of this exercise. Only 3 of them are above 70, between 71 and 100, which we've defined as critical to the business. And this is our high-level response plan if that delta comes together. If probability suddenly is it happens now and that control fails, this is what we'll do for those controls.
Perfect. Thanks for that explanation.
Pleasure.
Could one
Hello, can you hear me now? Please
yes, now we can hear you.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay. So the chat is disabled. That's why I couldn't type the question. I just wanted to double check. I'm back using my phone now. So looking at the study guide, it only mentions a 3-minute video. There's no mention of a presentation. Do we need to do a presentation also? It's a PowerPoint, for example, sorry.
No, so the main thing is just the 3-minute video. Now, one of the ways you can make the video is you can use like presentation and like a slideshow and then do like a voiceover, for instance. But no, the deliverable, the thing that we need to receive at the end of it is a 3-minute video. Then if you're selected as one of the winners during the closing ceremony, your group will have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about your video and your final product beyond what's just in there. And for that, you can use a presentation if you want to. But no, the main thing is just a 3-minute video. There is no like presentation outside of that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. And I think that there are no more questions, and we're also exactly on time, almost 1 minute more. But do you want to do you have any final words of advice or anything for the participants, Justin? Because otherwise, we're so grateful to have had you here, to be able to answer these questions, and also for you to give all this extra information. And the table, although it looked a bit intimidating, it's a very valuable thing, of course, to be able to fully understand, like what's expected in this domain and everything as a whole. And the explanation was really interesting. But yeah, over to you.
Thank you. No, I don't. If there's in the absence of any more questions, thank you. It's always fun. And to everyone who's here and who's going to participate, good luck. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone comes up with. And for those of you who were in my presentation and are here now, it's nice to see the same names. and I've noticed those same names are in my LinkedIn inbox too. So I didn't forget about you. I am just quite busy. But yeah, as always, thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, really enjoying it. Good luck.
Yeah, I would also like to say good luck, and I have to tell you guys, you're cool for picking this challenge. You're going to learn a lot from this challenge from a cybersecurity point of view, and I'm really rooting for all of you. I'm looking forward to at least one of the groups in this challenge being in the top 3. So you go get them. Let's have the 3 out of 3. Come, guys. So, cheers. Off you go and enjoy it.
Thanks, Tal. Thanks, Justin.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.